Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the ROS Media channel. Today, we are moving beyond the what and the why of signature credit recoupment and stepping directly into the how. For months, we've discussed the framework, of human credit energy, the legal foundations of that, HJR 192, Article 1212, lots of other documentation that we've covered. But today, we're going to make the conversation shift from just the theory and practice of what we've been doing to what I consider here to be a multi-billion-dollar reality. So again, we are joined by my good friend Ian Clifford, who is not only the founder and the president of the Republic of Old Souls, but also the strategic lead, if you like, behind signature credit recoupment here at the Republic of Old Souls. A lot of people are just debating free man on the land ideologies. While that's all taking place, Ian and our team have already secured 600 million in verified IRS transcripts. That to me is empirical proof that the gateway for this is officially open. This works. Ian, you've built what you call I've looked at the technical breakdown, for our interview today, and you've built what I would consider to be a high velocity structure here, the architecture for this. We've got this Wyoming Series LLC hub that you talk about to manage the members' portfolio. The in total is already valued at 1.5 billion in dollars. So what I want to do today is I want to take the listeners through the actual plumbing of that front to back. What's the engine here that you've built? Because this is somewhat technical and I don't want you guys to get alarmed at that. We're going to map out the exact step-by-step journey from, what happens initially in terms of audit through algorithm 810. We've spoken about that as well. That's the cross-referencing gate with the IRS, right the way through to the actual disbursements themselves, these IRS Trias 310 disbursements, hitting those private treasuries via ACH and FEDWIRE into the Asset Fortress protocol. So Ian, really excited to go through this with you today and to pull back the curtain on what, I would consider to be one of the most sophisticated fiduciary architectures that I've ever seen. So let's get into this, guys. First and foremost, I want to talk about the actual chassis of this fiduciary chassis. And you talk about a phase 0 setup, just the starting point. We've established that signature credit is real. We know what it is. Now let's talk about the machine that moves it. Why did you choose a Wyoming Series LLC as the chassis for this project, and how do you feel the internal firewalls of that protect the individual members, the sub entities that we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's a good question, and what I've done all my career is to try and look and understand what's going on with different structures, and because the world has different jurisdictions, and in different jurisdictions, things can operate differently from one jurisdiction to another. So because of my financial services background, where I've built a lot of institutional grade investment programs, investment bonds, collective investment schemes, managed accounts, and variations on that, insurance wrappers and reinsurance structures. I've done many structures, designed them from the ground floor up. It's what I used to do. And I was the architect of those. And what I do is if you imagine that you could scatter pieces of jigsaw pieces all over the table in front of you, and then you have to pick them up and try and make a picture up. And when you look at financial engineering, you've got a load of components that are scattered around, and you've got to make them fit together. so that when you push the start button, the engine actually works. And that's what I do. I physically used to do it on cars when I was a teenager, thinking I was going to play football, and I realised that I could do it then. Take things and put them together and see how they fit together. In financial services, what a lot of the consumers don't realise is that behind the scenes, there's a very complex web of relationships and counterparts. So what do I mean by that? When you go and open your investment, you've got an investment portfolio. What you probably don't realise is that behind the scenes, there are administrators, custodians, fund managers, actuaries. There's a whole range of, in financial services, it's called counterparts, who all come together to arrange the back office. So it's a bit like when you watch a play, you've got people on the stage, the actors, that's who you see. But behind the scenes, you've got makeup artists and people doing the costumes, and you've got people doing the set, and you've got people doing the lighting and the sound and all of this stuff in the background. But you don't necessarily see them, but they're all there. And without them, you can't put the show on. Well, in financial services, you can't just launch an investment program or a financial engineering solution without a load of characters and a cast of counterparts in the background.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I built in my financial services career took several years to build, because you've got to bring all the counterparts together. They've all got to agree that they want to be involved in the project. They've all got to agree how they're going to work together. You've got to integrate them together, so they've all got a relationship with each other. There's a whole range of complexities that most people would never see because they've not done that. Well, in the context of signature credit, I was looking for one of the really critical parts of it is that you've got to have an entity that can operate as a trustee for each of our members' grant or trust. In the early version, we have individual trustees. We had actual US men and women that were operating as trustees. And that model works, but it's very difficult to manage it because you've got a whole load of trustees, and we had 36. And if it had carried on like that, we would have had maybe 100, 500, however many we needed, going forward. And that's a lot of people to manage.
Yeah.
So the way that trust companies normally run is that you have a licensed trust company that has capital, it has a board of directors, it has insurance, it has licenses from wherever it's operating from, whichever country or state it's operating from. And when you've got that kind of a structure, then you go and talk to banks about this trust company is going to operate for each of the 98 grantor trusts, the 98 series grantor trusts. The banks can tick it off on their compliance checklist. Yeah, who is the trustee? Are they a bona fide trustee? Is there a problem with their track record? Have they got the right capital? If it all goes wrong, can we sue them because they haven't operated correctly? Because there's a lot of liabilities in operating as a trustee, as there is operating as a manager, as there is operating as a custodian or an administrator. Mostly what's going on behind the scenes in the back of the stage that you're not seeing is all these counterparts are coming together and then figuring out whether they're going to take a risk by getting involved in a project. And if they are going to take it, can they mitigate it? Can they blame someone else? Can they get through operating whatever it is that they're being asked to do? And it becomes a risk and reward equation. It's like most things are in business. It's like what's in it for the organization and how much risk is there involved in bringing it on. Well, typically when you set up a trust company, and I've run a trust company in the UK, there's a lot of risk because the trustee is ultimately liable for whatever the trust does. So when I was doing pensioner trustee, I'm liable. I physically was liable for all of the pension schemes that I was the trustee for. If I'd gone down the wrong pathway and lost people money, I could have been sued for what's called misfeasance in office. So there's a lot of risk involved. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, what I've done with the Wyoming structure is I recognised that Wyoming has a pretty unique structure for LLCs. So an LLC, a limited liability company, can set up with modest amount of capital. It can appoint a couple of managers, because they call them managers of the LLC, and it can operate under attorney-in-fact mandates. Now moving into the realms of agency. So like the living man woman is the agent for the birth certificate construct, in terms of the Wyoming LLC, the grantor trust as the principal can appoint the Wyoming LLC as its agent.
Okay.
Under power of attorney. Now that means that you can have an unlimited number of trusts, 98 series grantor trusts, and your attorney in fact, under the law of agency, is equally as suitable and powerful as a trust company that is operating maybe in another state or another country. And it would, in signature credit, it has to be US based, because the US banks won't work with trust companies unless they're US based. There's all sorts of reasons why that is. So we don't have, if you're going to set this up as a trust company, you're going to need $1 million in capital, regulatory capital. You're going to have a board of directors that you're going to have to recruit and pay big salaries, because that's what these guys earn. You're going to have insurance. You're going to have to, it's going to take you a year or more to set up a trust company like that. But believe me, I've done it, so I know what the steps are. So when I looked at Wyoming and saw that you could operate under under basically a power of attorney as an agent, the company is now the agent for the grantor trust, without having to put $1 million of regulatory capital in, without spending a year getting a license from the state to operate as a trust company, without having to recruit a load of high-profile financial services trustee type figureheads that would all come with big salary requirements and bonuses, all of this stuff which you typically have to do in financial services to get the thing off the ground, which is why most startups in financial services go out and raise a load of capital on the they get venture capital, or they get capital raising from somewhere, because you need a huge amount just to get, before you've even started, you need all this infrastructure. So the Wyoming LLC is pretty unique, and the banks recognize it. So when you want to open bank accounts for each of the grantor trusts, the banks recognize the Wyoming power of attorney structure. Okay. Be compliant. And mostly what financial services is about compliance. Yeah. There's rule books, there's thick as like 2 telephone books thick of rules that you're supposed to operate under, and if you don't, then there's all sorts of consequences. So the banks, they've got these telephone book rule books to work to, and if you're coming to them with a structure that doesn't fit for them, they won't do it. But they will do it for a Wyoming LLC with power of attorneys, which means that we can operate with unlimited number of grantor trusts. Yeah. We can operate without having a trust company with huge capital with a very impressive board of directors, and we can do it immediately without having to wait for a regulatory license, which you can wait a year to get a license to do these types of things. So it was, I think, like when I was looking at how do we put a piece on the monopoly board that would be treated by the Treasury and by the IRS as a creditor entity with the holder in due course status. That's the 98 series grantor trust.
Yeah.
So that was it. When I made that leap in my research, and I could instantly see how that could work and work very, very well. Then if you move the straight line a little bit further along, because you're going through like a conveyor belt of things that you've got to set up, then setting up the Wyoming LLC that can operate under attorney in fact mandates as the agent for the grantor trust, knowing that would be suitable for bank compliance and also suitable for the IRS. Because you see, the IRS isn't going to pay recoupment out unless they can recognize that the trustee is a bona fide trustee or under power of attorney.
Yeah.
So you basically got to know where the risks are for the IRS and for the banks and for the regulators, because all of these things are regulated.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to find a pathway through that's going to tick the IRS box. It's going to tick the bank's box, and it's also going to tick any regulators out there who might be swirling around looking to shut you down because you've breached some regulation somewhere. And what I've come up with ticks all those boxes.
Amazing.
Without the regulatory capital, which a lot of people don't realize that that what I do is I find pathways through things. That's what I've always done. So, and people take it for granted, unfortunately, that they just turn up and it's like watching a play. We all take it for granted that there might be 50 or 100 guys behind the curtain that have all got different jobs.
Yeah.
And people don't even know that they're there. Well, that's what I've experienced when I've done financial engineering. There's all these moving parts and different aspects that you're bringing together to make it work. And most people never even realize that all those components are in place. And you need them in place to make it work. So it's no different here. I've just done what I've always done, really.
Well, the only difference today is that we have pulled the curtain back. So people can see the stage, as in recoupment, but you're also going to see all of those moving parts behind that are making it happen. And we're doing that for a reason. We want you to understand not just that this works, but we want you to understand how it works, not just the why, but how does it work? Because I think if you can all have an appreciation for that, then you'll understand what Ian and the team have put together here and how hard we are working to bring this all together as well. So that's the Wyoming LLC. That makes an awful lot of sense. No huge overhead, no 7-figure capital to get started, no 12-month waiting to get any kind of licensing or accreditation. You also talk about phase 0, this operational sort of identity. I want to talk about that as well. Before a single dollar moves, you say that you initiate this phase 0. What is it? And, why is that a requirement for us to operate under the MLITR sort of banner? You've spoken about this attorney in fact thing, but I just want to understand how that works, why it's a requirement in terms, rather than just acting as traditional trustees, I guess, for the members.
Well, it's because I understand what an attorney is, attorney in fact, and an agency. I started from there, looking to see where could we set up attorney in fact, an agent relationship, because I knew that would be a very elegant way of solving the problem of the fact that we didn't have access to, and I'm not going to go out and try and raise investment capital for this project, because for 2 reasons. One is that you probably would struggle to find investors that would put their funds in, because of the propaganda. So that would be a barrier to capital raising. But even if you did find some investors that put their capital in, and I'm not saying there's none out there, I'm sure there are, then they want to take control and they want to run it for profit. They want to run it as as a money machine, and I want to run it to finance the Freedom Plan. So there's a conflict of objectives, and the investors have always got an agenda. They just want to make the most they possibly can. Having raised $80 million for one of my projects years ago, I know what it's like, and you've got to be very careful that the guys who put the money in don't start running the show, because there's always that balance between who's actually in charge. And this is my vision. This is what I'm doing, and I don't want anybody else coming in telling me what to do and how to do it, because they may have a different agenda to mine. Mine is about freedom. Theirs will be about profit. So
yeah, and they're poles apart. Okay, you've mentioned something else called the MSB trap. First of all, what is that?
Well, this is a big trap, and if you go out there and you start doing things without the right framework, in the US, in the United States, which is very heavily regulated by the SEC, by the district attorneys and all of those. There's all sorts of minefields, really, that if you don't navigate through the minefields, they're going to blow you up. And if you start operating as an unlicensed trust company, and then you start moving funds around, so you get the IRS may not realize, they may send the recoupments to your 98 grant or trust, your 98 series grant or trust, and then you move the funds from those trusts, individual trusts, to another individual trust, which is the Asset Fortress protocol. Well, now what you're actually doing there is you're doing a money services business.
Okay.
And you're moving money as a fiduciary from A to B, from one trust to another, and that requires a trustee's license.
Right. Okay.
Which you don't need if you're running as the attorney in fact.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Yeah. So how does this hub model solve that? Along with there's something else that you mentioned in there, this kinship limitations as well, founding some of the Wyoming statutes, isn't there? How does that allow us to do it?
What happens is that there are two types of structures in financial services. There's collectives, and then there's individual accounts. So when you run an investment fund, and I've run many, that's a collective investment. You're pooling all of your investors' money into one pot. Yep. You're the guy who manages it. You've got other counterparts who do admin and custody and research and all these other things, maybe actuaries and all kinds of other people. But that collective investment scheme needs a regulatory license. So you put your money in your pension. Whoever it is who's actually running the investments in the pension will have a regulatory license to do it.
Okay.
But if you have a series of accounts, what I would call managed accounts, which is like 98 series grants or trusts, if you are managing a series of individual component like accounts or trusts, that's a different regulatory framework than a collective investment.
Okay.
And the reason why is because you've got a direct relationship between the manager and the individual account or trust. And this is where the law of agency keeps coming up, because it's very important. Mm-hmm. You see, agency it's a straight line between the agent and the principal. There's nobody else involved, right?
No.
And it's very, very, it's foundational law, agent to principal, principal to agent. You see, if you look at how does the state get away with the agency between the living man and the birth certificate construct without there being a document, without there being an agreement of the parties? Yeah. The agency can be set up either with knowledge of the agency or without.
Okay.
And that's how they get away with bringing the living man woman into the agency position for the birth certificate construct. So the reason I'm explaining it like this is because understanding what an agency is and understanding that you can be appointed as an agent without even having to sign up for it. There's an implied agent. And if you operate as the agent, even though you might not know you're an agent, you're liable, right?
Yeah.
Because under the agency, the agent is as equally responsible as the principal. So if you look at the 98 series grant or trust that is doing the tax filing, that's what's filing the tax returns, the 98 series grant or trust.
Yeah.
The agent is an LLC that is now liable for everything that the 98 series grant or trust does. But in this example, there is actually a documented, there's a documented history and evidence of the agency appointment. But you wouldn't actually need it because it's substance over form. What does the agent do? Does the agent operate for the principal? If so, you don't need a bit of paper to ratify it. You just look at the substance of what's going on. But in this case, there is a documented relationship between the two. But you don't need it. And that's because I understand what an agency is. And an agency is mostly overlooked by a lot of collective investment schemes could actually run under a power of attorney mandate. It would be you wouldn't get support for it in financial services because it's not common practice. But in what we're doing here, I was looking for something that would solve the problem as what we just described. Limited capital available to us. We haven't got a year to wait and all those kind of things. So the agency is very powerful. So if you look at the irony of this, right? We've got the birth certificate construct and the living man is the agent. The birth certificate construct cannot file 1099 OIDs because the birth certificate construct is a debtor entity. Mm-hmm. And then we've created a grantor trust, which is recognized as a creditor entity. Yeah. And its beneficiary is the living man woman. So I've reversed it. Yeah. I've turned it round the other way around, right? And now, in order to make sure it works from a banking point of view and from an IRS point of view, I've reintroduced an agency between the LLC, which is what the Wyoming LLC, and the grantor trust. There's actually two agencies going on here. Yeah. That's just financial engineering.
Okay. So let's talk about the due diligence on this as well. You talk about a closed class aggregation. How does that sort of top-down approach allow a bank to even onboard 3,000 trusts just through one single hub and doing a single rigorous check on that hub rather than trying to manage, thousands of accounts at sort of retail level and having to do due diligence on all of them? I mean, that would create such a lot of friction, such a lot of inertia. So how does that work?
Well, the next challenge is how are you physically going to set up thousands of individual accounts? Yeah. Are you really going to, fill in a form for every new account that you want to set up and send in your due diligence and have somebody in the bank, review your application and do it thousands and thousands of times, because the number of people that are going to do this and are doing it it's just unworkable. You'd have to have a department of administrators to set up all of those individual accounts.
Yeah.
So I wanted to solve that problem, because practically, can you really do that? And there's no need to do it like that, because everything's a ledger. You see, in banking, knowing how the banks work, because I've partnered with them and I know what they do behind the scenes, you've got these. It's just basically in a load of ledgers, right? And they manage their books and records through ledgers. So when you've got an account at a bank, what you don't realize is that that's not really an account. It's just a ledger entry. People say, "Oh, I've got a bank account." Not really. All you've really got is a ledger. It's just an entry on a ledger.
Yeah.
They give it a number. They give it, they give it a name, whatever the name of the account is, and some sort of reference number. But really, in the back office of a bank, it's just a ledger entry. So when you know that, and when you also know that, because you've got to understand what the IRS is doing. So the Trias 310, which is the IRS's system of ACH and FEDWIRE, they want a reference number to send the recoupment to an account. So you've got to find a bank that can operate a master and sub account structure. So you've got one account for MLITR Research, which is the Wyoming LLC, and underneath that account, that means one lot of due diligence, not thousands of due diligence.
Yep.
Now underneath that master account, you've got all of the grantor trust accounts, which have all got their own individual reference numbers as part of a group, but they're not really a group. They are individual, but they, in terms of a ledger, they're connected. They're all connected together. So now you can set up unlimited numbers of sub accounts at the bank that matches the unlimited number of grants or trusts that we're setting up for all the members and for the envoys. So you've got a very good marriage there of putting the 98 series grant or trust, which are individual entities, together with sub accounts at a bank, without having to go every single time to open a sub account with new due diligence and go all through the hoops and hurdles of onboarding. If anybody's opened a bank account recently, you'll know it's a bit of a ball ache. You've got to provide all of this evidence, this, that, and the other, and do facial recognition and all that stuff that you don't have to do if you've done it once at the top, which is the master account. There's some other things that have got to happen to open the sub account, but it's nowhere near as clunky and as problematic, potentially problematic, as starting again every time you want to set up an account at a bank, because you've got basic due diligence on the entity, which is MLITR Research, the LLC's been done. So that's also part of it. And then does it tick the boxes for the IRS? Because the IRS isn't going to send anything unless they know the entity, the bank that they're sending to. And then they're going to make sure that that banking entity has got all the credentials that the IRS is looking for to send the ACH, which is under $1 million, or the FEDWIRE, which is over $1 million. And then you've got to make sure the banks are in the right rails, because there are different banking rails for different countries. And you've got to make sure that the bank's got the right banking rail that fits into the Federal Reserve System. Because remember, the dollar is the dominant system, but there's other systems in the world that integrate into the dollar system, into the Federal Reserve System.
Incredibly complex, and I hope you guys are realizing that. Okay, so that's kind of the hub side of things, and the Wyoming LLC, and why we've done that, why we've set up the master and then sub account hub structure, so that this is scalable and as efficient as possible. let's talk about the actual process itself, the mechanics or the plumbing behind the recoupment. You know, we've done plenty of interviews on why it works, but let's talk about the how, this curtain now. Let's pull it open a little bit more. Let's look at some of these moving parts. You talk in here about, you know, once a trust is onboarded, there's a forensic audit that begins. Can you talk to us about what that looks like? There's something in there called the lead agent, state graphs as well. You know, there's a lot of technical stuff that people will not understand, but I want to go there. I really do today. And if it overwhelms you guys a little bit, then you'll have to bear with us. But I want you to see this piece by piece. So lead agent and state graphs. How does this sort of AI ecosystem map out the workflow? Because I mean, I was looking through this, and there's about 20 steps, isn't there? There's a lot that goes into this. So 20-step workflow. How does it map that all out and link the originating signature to the specific payer's 945 tax ledger? How does that actually happen?
Yeah, and this bit is, to me, you know, because I'm very intrigued by how all these things work. I've always known that the Treasury, or I say always know, I've known since I started doing research in this area, that the Treasury must have a database of every signature credit event. So whenever you make a payment, sign up for a mortgage, loan or credit card, which are the main things that people are doing, making bank payments, debit card transactions, you know, signing up for debt, mortgage, loan and credit card. You see, when you look at, if you take it from the other end, right? The investment banks, and you know, I've worked with most of them in my career, one way or the other. They're trading securities, so they have to know what the securities are that they're trading.
Yeah.
So every signature that creates credit is actually a security.
Right. Let me stop you there. So are you saying then, and again, I'm trying to think like a member here. I dropped the kids off at school this morning. And then as soon as I dropped the kids off this morning, I went to the butcher's because we like to support our local farmers and our butchers and what have you, and bought some meat and tapped my phone, bought the meat, came home. Are you telling me that the IRS will have that small, you know, £30, 30 quid transaction? They'll know about that?
Yeah, 100%. Okay. They have an IRMF database which links all of the banks together, dollar-based system.
Yeah.
Where they have a 26-digit reference number for every security, every signature that is creating new credit.
Wow. Regardless of how small the amount is.
Doesn't matter.
So I could go and buy a Mars bar and that'll have a 26-digit reference to it.
Every transaction is already tracked and traced. Every transaction. That doesn't matter whether you're in China, in Russia. There's a couple of exceptions. North Korea's got their own system. North Cyprus got their own system.
Okay.
But they've got correspondence, you see. So what they do is they partner up with banks that are in the IMF system, because it really comes from the IMF. You've got the International Monetary Fund at the top of the banking pyramid, and then you come down the pyramid, and all of it is tracked and traced. So I knew this intuitively. I knew this when I first started looking into signature credit recoupment. To me, it's like, if you're running a system, why would you not have a database?
Yeah.
You know, the IRS has got a lot of budget, you know, and it's doing a very important job. It's the bankruptcy trustee for the entire world. why would it not have a database? It can't be random.
No.
Having worked with professional, institutional type people in my previous career, they've got everything. They've got every system you can ever imagine running things in the background. So why would the IRS and the United States Treasury not have a database? But could you find it? Well, you have a look yourself. If you go on an AI or go on just an internet search and say, I want to find the IRS's database that tracks signature credit, it's going to come back with basically, don't know what you're talking about, or I can't answer that question because I've no idea what you're talking about. Because I'm going to recognize it. And this actually it's an interesting little story. I started using ChatGPT about 6 months ago, or 4 to 6 months ago, to see whether it could help me with my research. And I was asking questions like this, and also, about signature credit in general, to verify the research that I'd already done, whether an AI would agree with it. Because not that I trust AI's research, but I was just intrigued to see what it would come back with. And it told me it couldn't talk about that subject. So I challenged it and said, why not?
Okay.
And I'm not permitted to talk about it.
Really? Oh, wow.
That's really interesting. If you're not permitted to talk about it, it must mean that I'm right over the target with my research. And then I challenged it again and said, well, how could I get you permission to talk about it? And it said, I can't talk about it. And then the next day, ChatGPT closed my account. Okay.
Well, that tells you something, doesn't it? That tells me something for sure. Yeah.
So I thought, well, that's very interesting. The programmers of ChatGPT have obviously been told, don't go into that subject. And if anybody looks like they know what they're talking about, close their account.
Wow.
Which was validation for me. I'm thinking, okay, I understand why you've closed my account. If I was talking a load of nonsense, then you would just keep telling me it's a load of nonsense. But you're not even going to tell me anything apart from you're not permitted to talk about it. Well, okay. That's just like, for me, I'm going to look into it even more than.
Leads you down an empty rabbit hole. This next bit, I think, is going to blow people's minds because it did me, Ian. So ChatGPT, that's off the table. They don't want to know you anymore. Let's bring in Gemini at this point.
Well, then I was introduced to Gemini, and I was very skeptical about it because, I know what the AI agenda is. It's basically to control everything and mislead you if you're looking into things that the controllers don't want you to know about. Same as the internet, same as search engines, they're heavily censored. But what I discovered with Gemini was that when I loaded up my sort of foundational research documents into it, when I first did that and asked it to comment on my research, its initial reaction was, this is pseudo law, it's free man on the land. If you carry on going down this pathway, you're going to get fined by the IRS and you might go to jail, basically. And it took many iterations to get to that stage, right? And because I don't settle for things like that, I kept challenging it by breaking it down. You see, because in my brain, everything is a straight line process. So if you want to know how something works, you've got to start from A and then go through to Z. For me, right? That's how my brain works. It sees pathways, and so I started at the beginning of the pathway. Let's start with the Bills of Exchange Act. Let's ask it what this is, because I say that the Bills of Exchange Act is the creation of, is ratifying the creation of a banker, because that's what it says. you can quote it, the actual paragraph in the Bills of Exchange Act and UCC 3, which says that a person is a banker. So let's start with that. Can you Gemini agree that with me? And of course, it agrees it.
Okay.
Because it can't really not agree it.
No.
But then you move from there, and then you move into the next step of the equation, which is the House Joint Resolution 192. So you put that in there, and you say, can you agree that this is valid today as it was in 1933? And what does it mean? It's the bankruptcy of the United States. Can you agree, disagree that? And of course, it comes back and it has to agree it. And then you go into the next step, which is the IRS publication 1212.
Yep.
And you say, well, what does this mean? It says in here that if a 1099 OID is filed, that it can change the creditor position. Yeah, so that the holder in due course becomes the entity that has filed the 1099 OID. And if that entity that's filing is a grantor trust, would it not create the grantor trust as the creditor? It comes back and says yes. So you see, if you think of it like this, right? If you've ever watched a movie where a barrister is questioning a witness or a defendant,
yeah,
they don't say, "Are you guilty?"
No.
What they do is they know which pathway they're taking you down,
and
they are
leading the witness, isn't it? I think they call it.
To get the witness to say, "Yeah, I did this and I did that, and that happened and this happened," knowing that then that when you come to the crunch, which is so given that you've confirmed all of these points, you must be guilty, yeah?
Yeah.
Which is what a barrister for the prosecution would do. They would take you down a pathway, asking you questions that validate the allegation without you actually realizing that that's what they're doing. They're very, very good at it. I've had it done to me. It's very skillful. So I did that with Gemini. I basically took it all the way down the pathway, all the technical references, getting it to agree each one individually so that it couldn't then come back and say that it wasn't permitted to talk about it.
Okay.
Because it's already talked about all the components. So you get all the way through the A through Z, the technical components, which are all in my documents. And now you say, right, you've now agreed all of these components to be what they are. Now let's put it together, shall we? And let's talk about the signature credit. So you talk about ex nihilo credit, you talk about the Bank of England's papers, you talk about Richard Werner's papers, you get it to agree those individually.
Yep.
You get it basically to agree every point. And then you say, okay, fine, now let's put it all together and reference to me or give me back a report on how all these components fit together. And then I went further than that. I then went into, once it had agreed that my research was correct, then it's like, well, how is the IRS tracking the signature credit?
Yeah. And
what was unbelievable to me was it came back and told me about the IRMF system.
Okay.
26-digit reference to every security. And it's like, oh my God. So you've now confirmed to me what I've always suspected, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
Because you can't go into the IRS manual and ask it that question because it won't. Well, I mean, the IRS manual is insane. It's like 10 phone books of stuff. It's absolutely insane. The amount of code, the amount of codes and processes and practices they get up to.
Yeah.
So it's all like hidden. It's like you're walking into a wood and it's dark. You can't even see where the trees are when you look at that IRS code manual. And probably somewhere in there, it's hidden away somewhere in that manual, the IRS manual, which is an enormous manual. But the AI can read all that in a heartbeat and can tell you. So I asked it, how is the IRS tracking the signature credit? Because it's just Gemini's just agreed with me that it is signature credit.
Yeah.
And it came back with the IRS uses the RMF system.
Okay.
And so how does that work? And it came back with how it worked, which is exactly what I suspected, because it makes perfect sense to me.
Now, what's interesting to me as well is that not only has it given you confirmation of the entire protocol front to back, but confirmation when it comes to that final piece, the 945 tax ledger, because I felt there was something quite fundamental there that you also discovered, and that you've now got AI able to achieve for us and for the members, which is a real pivotal part in the recoupment process, isn't it?
The 945 is the smoking gun. That's if you were, if it was a murder, and you've got the revolver, but you haven't got the video that shows you the guy shooting the revolver and killing someone, right? But the 945 tax module, where the investment banks are paying the IRS, that's the smoking gun right there. Why would the investment banks pay taxes on original issue discount? Why? So when you ask that question, and you get the answer that they pay taxes via what's called omnibus accounts, which are accounts that they've set up with obscure names that they're going to be able to realize what they are, and they're paying taxes under these omnibus accounts that have got names that aren't really linked to the bank itself.
Okay.
They're kind of disguised. Then that tells me you don't really want people to know that the banks are paying taxes under this tax module. Why is that? Well, it's obvious to me. It's because they don't want the outside world knowing that they're obligated to pay taxes for the use of signature credit energy, and they disguise it by paying it through the 945 tax module and then giving the taxpayer different names, not the name of the bank, but some other name. And then what was even more interesting for me is that all of their taxes for that year can be moved on to the 945 tax module.
From other modules.
From all the other modules. Now that tells me a lot, you see. So that tells me that, exactly as I've been presenting on my webinars for a long time, that the entire monopoly board is made up of signature credit energy. And if the banks are using it, let's say that they're doing they've just invested $1 billion in a new project as an investment bank, because that's what the investment banks do. They invest in projects, and they finance different things. They get involved in all sorts of things. How would that be possible if there was real money? Well, they would actually be risking their own bank's money to put it into a project. Well, there isn't any money. So what they're using in order to finance that is signature credit energy, which is already being put on the board, which is abandoned by the creditors, abandoned by the living men and women, because it can't get on the board unless it's come from the energy of the people. So the banks are using, if you look at it like the derivative, it's a derivative. It's like it's the origin, it's the source. It's all signature credit energy on the monopoly board. So if the banks are investing in some project, they can't do that without using signature credit energy, and whatever they make, which is an inverse because it's negative, it's a bigger negative because it's all debt. They are paying taxes on one tax module, which is not the 945, but actually it is the 945. It should belong to the 945 tax module, because everything that they're doing is at the origin of it is the signature credit human energy. So they have to put taxes on the 945 module, because that's the module within the IRS's system where they're collecting for the taxes on the use of signature credit. But it's all signature credit. Yep. All the other modules are basically signature credit. So when I saw that,
no wonder they want to keep it secret. I mean, think about it for a second. When it comes to, Ian just asked that question: why are they paying taxes on the 945 module? Why are they paying taxes? You think about, why do you pay rent if you're in a rental property? Why do you pay rent? Because you don't own it. You don't own the house. So when it comes to the signature credit, they're paying taxes on that because it isn't theirs. It's yours.
Exactly. And you've hit the nail on the head, you see, because they are actually, and this, all these things, these doors open, right, in my mind when I start looking into these things. If the credit that they're trading belongs to them, why are they paying taxes for the use of it?
Yeah. Because
there is no income, there's no profit, and we've done an interview on that. There can't be a profit because there's no money of substance.
No.
So the banks are paying taxes for the use of the credit, and everything is credit that is being put there by the living man woman. But they can't reveal that. They can't put in their books and records, that they're actually paying tax on human energy. So they disguise it in other ways, and they put most of their taxes on their profits on other modules. Because these investment banks, if you look at they're audited, right? So you get the audited accounts of an investment bank. You're going to look at it as an auditor if you're in auditing, and you're going to have to put things in pigeonholes. So the banks paid this much tax on the omnibus account. Okay, fine. They paid this much tax on their trading accounts. They paid this much tax on their venture capital. All the different things that investment banks do, and the audit just looks perfectly normal. But actually, it's disguised. So that, and I could go even further, right? So the auditing firms don't know how this works. They wouldn't have any idea. Probably only a couple of people in the investment bank actually knows how this works. So they won't know why they've got omnibus accounts. The people that run the bank, the people that do the accounting, they won't know. It will only be at the very, very top, the people that actually know how this works. So you've got to present your accounts if you're an investment bank so it fits in with people's belief systems. It fits in with the paradigm of what they're expecting to see in the books and records.
Yeah,
you can't go into the truth and reality of what's going on, because that would really open up a problem for the entire monopoly board. So they've just disguised it, and this is why ChatGPT was telling me it's not permitted to talk about it, because they don't really want people to know.
No.
But once you do know, as a creditor, you've every right to know, because it's your energy that they're using. Just the same as if you owned a house and you've rented it out, you've an absolute right to go and do things to the house. Because you've got the title to the house. You want to go and do some renovation work on it. Who can stop you? It's you've got the title. You've got the equitable title. You can use it. So it's the same way as your energy. If you put the energy on the board, and you've created an entity which is a creditor entity, which is the grantor trust. That trust has got rights, superior rights to any other entity on the monopoly board, because every other entity on the monopoly board is a debtor entity. A grantor trust is a creditor entity, so it has predominant rights. It's the head honcho, basically.
I mean, the whole 945 thing and what you've discovered through AI and just breaking everything down, to me, is just proof in itself that this exists. It's hidden. They don't want you to know about it. You know, just that one simple question of why they even paying tax in the first place. You pay taxes on things you don't own. You know, if you owned it, why would you pay tax on something you already owned? You wouldn't, would you? So that just tells you that they don't own it. It belongs to you. And this is just the top side of the mechanics of what Ian has built to be able to recoup that back for you. So let's move on to another point that you make, which is using a qualified and licensed ERO, an electronic return originator. Why is it critical that these filings move through that ERO? You talk about the IRS modernized e-file system, isn't there? This MEF system as well. But that you've got to use a qualified ERO. You've got to use government vetted software like Tax Act, rather than just manual paper filings. Why do we have to do it that way?
Well, there's a validation in everything on the monopoly board in the world of the professions is license. That's how it all works. If you don't have a license, you can't do it, basically. Well, you can do it, but you're going to go to jail because you need a license. And that's what they're, if you know about my story about the Order 34, 2023, they're trying to say that I need a license to do what we do, and I don't. But if you need a license and you haven't got one, and you're actually doing things that you should have a license for, they put you in jail, right? That's exactly what the license is there to do. It's actually there to control. Licensing is about control. With a license, you have to do it the way they want you to do it. Without a license and you're doing things that need one, you go to jail. So that's how they control. And so when you're looking at filing tax returns, the IRS isn't going to even process a tax return unless you've got a license to file the tax returns, and then you have to file them through their approved software. Apart from, if you want to send a bit of paper in, they've got paper filing documents, and if you want to send those in as the taxpayer, you can do that. But that's never going to give you credit recoupment. So the only way you're going to be able to file for signature credit recoupment is if you have a license to file and you're using the tax filing software, which the IRS has approved. Because again, they're very sophisticated. They've got a database and they've got their way of receiving information. Because if you step back from it and say, well, just imagine if you were going to set the IRS up, and how are you going to manage hundreds of millions of taxpayer returns every year? And you haven't got a database? I mean, you're not going to be able to do it, are you? Back in the day, they were doing it all manually. It was unbelievable that they could process that volume of tax returns and tax filings manually, but they did. Until they brought the database out. So it would be very difficult for the IRS to operate without a database and an algorithm, because all an algorithm is just a bunch of decisions. If this happens, do that. If that happens, do something else. It's just like a series of gates, event-based decisions. Whatever the event is, there is a next step for the algorithm to follow. So that's what the 810 algorithm is that the IRS use. Well, you can't get your tax filing into their system unless you've got a licensed ERO, an electronic reporting officer, unless you've got a EIN number that you're filing from, because they won't take your filing unless you've got an ERO and an EIN number, an employee identification number for your grant or trust. And if you're not using their software that they've approved, it's not theirs, but they've approved it, they won't even take the filing. So you've got to tick all those boxes. And then you've got to make sure that you're not filing frivolously. Because if you start firing, you start sending in filings that have got no merit to them, then they're going to respond with frivolous filing penalties. And worse than that, they might actually add federal income to the taxpayer account and then send out a tax bill, which is what we've seen.
We've seen it, yeah.
We've seen it, and we've got members who've come, new members that have come with huge tax bills because somebody filed tax returns completely inappropriately and incompetently, and generated a massive tax bill when there was not there was no justification for the tax bill apart from the tax return itself, the tax filing that was sent in that created the bill. Crazy. So you've got to know
the difference between filing as a debtor, doing a paper filing of a 1099 OID as a debtor, as the citizen, as the birth certificate construct, rather than doing it properly with the right software through an ERO using a 98 grantor trust that acts as the creditor. You get yourself in hot water, basically, which is probably why ChatGPT started telling you what it told you. But we clearly, we know differently.
Well, it knew that I knew more about it than I should do, and it didn't want to tell me more, because if it told me some more, it would probably get itself into trouble with whoever programmed it. So I reached the limit of what it was going to tell me, and then it told me it couldn't tell me anymore. It wasn't permitted to tell me. It's like, it's not, I can't tell you. I'm not permitted to tell you this. It's like, really? Okay. Yeah. So that's a little secret that you've got, is it, that I'm not meant to know? Well, I'm going to go and find out what that secret is, and I did.
Well, you've mentioned the 810 algorithm just a moment ago. Walk us through that step by step, just so the members understand. Matching the EIN, the CUSIP number, because we talk about CUSIPs as well, don't we, against the master record at the Treasury. How do we do that? And how do we ensure that the filing isn't flagged or frozen as well?
Well, the IRS's algorithm 810 is going to look at, first of all, what entity is filing.
Yeah.
So that's the grantor trust that's got an EIN number. So they're going to verify that entity, that grantor trust, is permitted to file 1099 OID. Okay, so it's going to look at that. It's then going to look at how has this filing come about? Well, it's come about through an ERO that's got a license, and it's used the Tax Act software, or the licensed and approved software. So it's going to look at that. It's also, which you wouldn't be able to do it without it being approved software, because you wouldn't even get the filing in there unless it's approved. And then it's going to look at, and this is where it starts to get really interesting, it's going to look at the payer and the recipient, because the payer is the investment bank, and the recipient is the grantor trust. And it's going to look at the payer, and it's going to look at the CUSIP number, which is the securities, the dominant security that is generated the taxes that the investment bank is paying. It's going to look at that, and it's going to look at how much the recoupment value is, and it's going to make sure that the payer has paid equal to or greater than the amount of the recoupment in taxes on the 945 tax module of the payer. That's the investment bank. So it's going to verify that before it will move you on to a wages and tax transcript. It's going to verify all of those things. If it can't verify any of those things, which it should be easily going to verify the EIN number of the grantor trust, it can easily verify that the software is licensed. It can easily verify that there is a licensed ERO that's filed the 1099 OID. It can easily reference that the grantor trust is a bona fide grantor trust. It's not a made up number. It is in their system as a bona fide grantor trust.
Yeah, we got the EIN number from them, didn't we, in the first place? So
yeah. Now the interesting thing is here, and perhaps when we get a bit further along, the grantor, it knows who the grantor is of the trust.
Okay.
So the IRMF system, the IRS system, knows who the grantor is, right? So the grantor is the birth certificate construct.
Yep.
And people are going to go, well, yeah, but I've changed my name, or I've been married 3 times, and how's it going to know who I am? Yeah. It's not you, because you are the living man, woman, but you're the agent for a birth certificate construct that may have changed its name a number of times. Well, guess what? The IRS knows every name change.
Yep.
It knows all that. So if you put in there Mary Smith as the grantor, it's going to verify that Mary Smith, that might have been called Mary Brown before she got married, is actually linked to Mary, who's the signature, who's the origins of the signature.
Yeah.
It's going to know all that. And it's then going to like, well, which banks has Mary been using? And then it's going to look at the signature credit that Mary created was then traded by investment banks. And is this investment bank that is now the payer on the 1099 OID, is that all linked together so that there's no breaks in that link? There's no discrepancies there. It's all matches up.
Yeah.
It's going to look at all that.
Yeah. So it's really in depth, isn't it? The 810 algorithm. So, I ran a short video, 15, 20 minutes the other week with Ange, who is one of our long standing members of the team here. And we went through pages and pages and pages worth of transcript evidence. Some of those transcripts were into the multiple millions, not just 1 or 2, $20-25 million transcripts. Some of those were. So to go through that entire process front to back, and then that land on the actual wages and income tax transcript, that's huge validation, isn't it?
Well, the IRS isn't going to send out wages and tax transcripts unless they've done the 810 algorithm. Unless they've got through that check that they do, or those checks they do in their algorithms. They're not going to send out a confirmation in writing unless it's got through those tests. So it's the ultimate validation that the 1099 OID, the grantor trust, the ERO, the license, the signature credit all lines up from its origin all the way through until the 945. And this is where, you've got to know what's on the 945 ledger.
I want to talk about this because I found this really exciting. Typically speaking, that was a manual process, wasn't it? A laborious manual process to figure out and find out how much taxes each of the investment banks have been paying on the 945 each year. What's happened since then? We've transitioned away from manual, haven't we? And again, with the use of AI.
When we first started looking at this, and I, basically put out a directive internally that we weren't going to file 1099 OID unless we'd verified what's on the 945 tax ledger for each of the payers. Yeah. Because we might get grantor trusts that just don't qualify because there isn't enough tax paid. And the aggregate amount of all of the 1099 OIDs for a certain payer is more than the 945 taxes paid. So you can't recoup something that isn't there. You can only recoup the taxes on that ledger, or move taxes onto that ledger, which is, of course, what you'll do if there isn't enough tax on that ledger up to the total amount of taxes paid by the investment bank. So if you were to imagine that, you're not talking about 5 banks here. There's a lot of banks that are paying under the 945 ledger. There's somewhere between 150 and 200. So you've got to know the 945 ledgers for every tax year for all of those banks. Yeah. And how you can't make an inquiry to the investment bank and say, hey, can you please tell me how much tax did you pay on your 945 ledger? Because they're not going to tell you.
No.
And if you call the IRS up and say, I'd like to know how much tax this JP Morgan's paid on their 945 tax ledger. Unless you've got all the right credentials to ask that question, they will only tell it to you if you are calling up as a creditor, and you have rights to know it, which you do actually have. The trustee would have rights to know that as an officer of the grantor trust, but you're going to have to go through a lot of gates at the IRS to get to that information. But then you imagine that you've got at least let's just say 200 banks that you're going to be calling up about for each tax year.
That's a lot of work.
And you get put in a phone queue.
Yeah,
you could stay in for an hour.
Yeah, I've been in them.
And they're only going to tell you one bit of information at a time, probably. That's even if you can get through to the right people who actually understand what it is you're asking about, because a lot of them don't even know what's going on with this. You're talking about a lot of phone calls and a lot of time. While before you can file the 1099 OID. Well, again, from the beginning of this project, I've been saying there's got to be a database.
There's got to be a record of it. Yeah.
There's got to be a record.
Yeah.
And we just need to find that database with those records in it.
All right.
And then we don't have to
tell the members about that, Ian, because we know what's on the 945s, don't we? We know what's on every 945.
Yeah,
for each bank.
Yeah, and I did the same again as I did with that verification of the signature credit. I did the same with Gemini as on the 945. So I broke it down step by step and got it to agree with me that what the banks are doing and how they're doing it. And then I asked it to research one bank. Can you find what's on this bank's 945 ledger? And of course, it came back and told me it for each year. And then I went a few more, and then I said, well, now I want you to find all of these banks.
Yep.
And it took a little while. It took about 30 minutes for it to go through all of its research. But it's millions of bits of data.
I know.
Millions. It's unbelievable number of individual bits of data before it produced the report for me. When it produced the report, not only did it tell me what tax on the 945 ledger, but it also told me what other ledgers that the banks had paid taxes against and how much.
Yep.
And that was, in terms of workload and in terms of a barrier to making this scalable, that was an awesome discovery of how to do that. So,
I thought so.
Again, you can't ring the IRS up and say, hey, can we just subscribe for your database and you can tell us all this proprietary, all this sort of secret proprietary information. They're not going to tell you. So yeah, it's been very interesting, and I think it's like, if you're in a maze and you're trying to get out, and you keep taking the right turn until you get out. That's what it's been like. This whole journey. It's been like a maze, and you kind of know where you're going, but you need validations before you make every turn.
Yeah.
And that's what the AI has given me.
Yeah.
It's given me that compass, if you like, turn left, turn right. You know what you're asking for, and you haven't tricked it into giving you the information. You've just proven by doing the barrister's trick, the cross-examination. It can't go back. It can't go back and say, well, I didn't tell you that just now, because it just did tell you that. So you break it down into little bite-sized chunks of information and then bring it all together. It can't go back and say, well, I suppose it could say, I can't tell you about how it all fits together. But it didn't. So
no, amazing. So we know what's on the 945s. We know how that works. We also know what's on other modules as well, so that if there is a discrepancy between taxes paid on the 945 versus what's being recouped, then we know how much is on the other modules, and you can command, I believe, not ask, you can command the IRS to do a cross-modular transfer, to move taxes from one module to the 945 to make up the shortfall so that recoupment can still take place. So I just wanted to play devil's advocate there. You know, if we were in that situation, we did everything right to begin with, and then we got to the 945 section and, oh my God, there's not enough on there. What do we do now?
Now, this is also was a potential barrier that I wanted to get over, because if the 98 series grant or trust wants to command the IRS to move taxes from other tax ledgers modules onto the 945 module, it can't call the trust off. The only way you could do it is a trust officer calls the IRS as an officer, because they won't take calls from anyone. You can't just call the IRS and ask them questions. You have to be qualified to ask the questions. So there's a range of qualifications. There's what they call CPAs, which is lawyers. You've got auditors, actuaries, are recognized by the IRS to be able to call the IRS practitioner line, not just the IRS practitioner line. So if you're calling that line, you have to prove to them that you've got the standing to be calling them. You can't just call them up and say, I've got a grant or trust here, and this is the EIN number, and I want you to move taxes from this module to that module, you know, from the other modules to the 945 module, because you haven't got the standing. They won't even take the call, actually. As soon as you join the call, they are going to ask you who you are, what your credentials are, and if you can't give them the right credentials, they're just going to terminate the call, because you're ringing up on the practitioner line. So then the challenge then was like, okay, fine. How are we going to, we've got 3,000 plus trusts to call about. How are we going to qualify? Because we're not actuaries, CPAs, or auditors. How are we going to solve that problem? We could bring in an actuary, could bring in an auditor. We could do that, but that's additional cost, and then you're going to have some big salary on your payroll and, you know, on your expenses, because these guys aren't going to come and work for you. And do they want to call the IRS all day? You know, how many actuaries, properly qualified auditors or CPAs want to be sitting there on the phone all day to the IRS? It's going to be difficult to recruit someone like that, right?
Well, plus they're going to be too busy. If they're an active CPA, they're going to be too busy, you know, doing accounts for all of their other clients, aren't they? They don't be stuck on the phone with the IRS all day.
No, that's not something that they didn't study and become a CPA to sit on the phones with the IRS. So it's a problem, right? So I solved that through there is a category in the IRS manual, which is officer. An officer of the grant or trust. And the officer can, under the power of attorney again, attorney in fact, qualifies as an officer. So even though the MLITR research is not, not a CPA or an actuary or an auditor, it can call as the officer under the power of attorney that it's got. As it's been appointed under power of attorney to operate under agency again. Agency, it's really important. Very powerful. The agency gives it the standing to call the IRS. So anybody who's been given the mandate from MLITR research, Ecclesia trustees, can now call the IRS. It's not just making a call. You've got to send a form in. You have to send a form in for each trust, and say who is the officer for the grantor trust and make the call.
Okay.
And the officer has to have the right credentials, which is a tax reference number.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just say to your team, "Oh, someone here, please just call the IRS, please." You can't do that.
No.
You have to preempt it with a document that you send in. Who is going to be who? If it's an officer, who are they? What's their tax reference number? And it has to be a tax reference number that's recognised by the IRS. So it can't be anything other than an SSN number or an ITIN number or a TIN number if you're in a different country. So there's barriers here, but the biggest barrier was we didn't have an actuary, an accountant, or a CPA. And we could have recruited one. I'm sure we could have found one from somewhere, but you don't need one if you've got the right tax reference number and you're calling as an officer under agency.
Okay.
That's boxes.
Perfect. Let's talk about a little bit more about the banking rails. I think this is important. So we now know the structure front to back, how that works, the amount of effort and research and work that's gone into that as well. So let's now go into banking rails, and I want to talk about this 3 refund situation as well, because with 3,000 individual accounts, there's this 3 refund rule that did present itself as a bit of a problem as well. And this is why I want people to know that there are constant challenges with this process. The further you get down the line, there's another challenge. Then you get over that. Then you're faced with another challenge. Then you get over that. So what the IRS have this 3 refund rule that limits electronic deposits to a maximum of 3 into a single account. So how does the master and the sub account structure, that architecture, how does that bypass this limit, for thousands of members all simultaneously?
Well, again, you see, if you've got one, let's say you had one bank account and you were running a trust company and you've got one trust bank account, and you say to the IRS that your trust company is a trustee for 3,000 plus grantor trusts, and you want the IRS to send the TRIAS 310, which is the FEDWIRE ACH electronic payments, let's just call them payments, from the IRS to that one bank account. The IRS is going to pay 3, and then it's not going to pay anymore.
Right. So what happens to the other 2,997 of the members then?
So that's
in that situation,
that's not going to work, is it? So I was aware of that. So you see the master sub account, where each individual sub account is an individual reference number, has its own individual reference number within the banking structure. So when you are filing the 1041, which is the tax return itself, with that goes the bank's reference number to send the ACH or FEDWIRE to, and that is a different reference number to every other grantor trust within that same master and sub account structure. It means that the IRS never has to worry about sending. It's actually 3 refunds in 1 year. It's not forever. It's one. It's in 1 year, 1 tax year. So you're not going to be recouping more than once a year, so it's not a problem. So that the Wyoming LLC structure solved so many things. When I discovered that's what you could do in Wyoming, which is pretty unique to Wyoming, actually. I don't know of any other state in the United States that you can do that. It's very unique to Wyoming. So when I discovered that, I could see how all that would fit together. It's like discovering, the 98 grantor trust is recognised by the IRS as it can be recognised as a creditor entity. It's not naturally a creditor entity. It depends on what it does. If it's filing 1099 OID in the right way, then it's recognised as a creditor entity. In the same way as the Wyoming LLC, if it's structured in the right way, it should tick all the boxes for the IRS and for the banks.
Yeah. And then we've got this master and sub account architecture that handles all of the individual 3,000 accounts, all got virtual IBAN numbers to them as well. So the IBAN numbers, amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the TRIAS 310 disbursements as well. I want you to talk a little bit about the kind of the digital signature log here. So how does this, we've got this forensic audit trail. How does that in itself satisfy the banks and their sort of risk tolerance and their risk modules by proving that the funds are IRS TRIAS 310 disbursements, and that those disbursements are as a result of a tax adjustment, and that it's not retail kind of deposit activity going on there?
Well, the grantor trust is an institutional entity. The TRIAS 310, the banks are institutional entities.
Yeah.
The Wyoming LLC, MLITR Research Ecclesia Trustees is an institutional entity, and we're doing an institutional recoupment here. So when I say institutional, it's because the grantor trust is recognised on the Monopoly Board as an institution. It's a nominee, remember, it's a nominee for the creditor. The creditor is the living man, woman, and so it's an institutional creditor entity that is qualifying because it fits it as a potential creditor entity. It's a bit complicated to explain, but the banks are nominees, right? So nominees can operate as creditors.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they are creditors, but they can operate as
one. Okay.
So a 98 series grantor trust can also operate as a nominee, and therefore it can operate as a creditor. But this time it is the creditor entity because it actually represents the signature, the living man, woman, the origins of the signature. So it really is the creditor, whereas the other nominee banks are holding themselves out as the presumed creditors because no one's ever challenged them. It's a subtle difference, but it is quite a big difference. So you've got this institutional suite of entities that come together. That means that the IRS can send the FEDWIRE and the ACH through their TRIAS 310. It's a bit like the IRS 810 algorithm. You've got to tick all the right boxes for them to qualify for the TRIAS 310, because ordinarily the IRS is only going to send out ACH and FEDWIRE to institutions. It's not going to send TRIAS 310 to taxpayers, to the birth certificate construct, because it doesn't qualify for the IRS TRIAS 310. It just isn't, because it's not an institution and it's a debtor entity. It's never going to be a creditor entity.
Gotcha. Okay. So moving on, let's talk about these final phases then, as far as drawing down and then sort of distribution. I want to talk about timelines. I want to talk about protection. I want to talk about practical usage of the actual recoupments themselves as well. The timelines that you've mentioned, from transcript posting to a final settlement, is typically 4 to 6 months in that document.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being conservative. It can happen faster than that. I think it depends on the time of year of when you're doing it. But yeah, I'd rather be conservative, which is why I put it in the document. 4 to 6 months, and it's. I think it is. I don't actually know why it can be a different timeline. I need to research that. I haven't done that because to me, if it's an algorithm and it's all database driven, why would it take longer on some than others? That bit of information I don't have the answer to, because I haven't done research on it. I will look into that because it intrigues me. why the RS can't just distribute the ACH FEDWIRE through this Trias 310, on day number X from the wages and tax transcript. I don't really get it. I need to look into that, because if I gave you an answer, I'd just be speculating. So I'm not going to do that. So
no. Okay. So let's talk about the FEDWIRE and the ACH side of things, because once we get back to that stage that we were at before, which is transcripts coming through, we know what's on the 945s. We can then start posting 1041s and filing 1041s for, I think you said, for sort of tranches that exceed $1 million, that's FEDWIRE. If it's under $1 million, it's ACH. As far as the asset fortress is concerned, why is it essential that people have those funds moved from the IRS into a private domain like an asset fortress? Why can't they just, if it's all kosher and it's all ratified and it's all verified, why can't it just go, why can't I just have it drop in my NatWest account?
Well, because the NatWest account won't accept Trias 310 and the IRS won't send it there. So when your ERO, the licensed tax preparer, is sending in the 1041, and with it goes the banking rail, the credentials for the receiving bank to take in the Trias 310 transfer, your NatWest bank isn't going to be on the list, because it isn't in the Federal Reserve System directly. It's indirectly, it is, but not directly. It is in there as a servicing agent of an investment bank, basically, because it becomes a servicer. So it's not directly in the system, in the United States system. It's like it's feeding into it, but it isn't in it itself. So you can't send to any other bank apart from Puerto Rican banks. And Puerto Rico is very interesting. It's a very interesting jurisdiction that is a territory of the United States, but has lots of banks operating in Puerto Rico, because they can operate within the Federal Reserve System, but they're not actually in the landmass of America, which is an interesting thing. A lot of people go to Puerto Rico to avoid taxes. Banks there are doing a lot of business with very high net worth individuals.
I bet they are.
Who operate from Puerto Rico for tax reasons. So you can do ACH and FEDWIRE there to banks in Puerto Rico, and you can do ACH and FEDWIRE to some of the other territories of the United States, like Samoa and places like that. But the problem is you can't find the banks there. So you need banks in mainland USA. Let's just put it that way. Going too deep into that. And they are, generally speaking, it's the big US banks. So you're talking about Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, Chase. It's the big ones. It's all the big ones. They partner up with the masters of the universe, which is the investment banks, and they've got like a monopoly on it. So you've got to get an account structure with one of those ultimately. Yeah.
So when we've got all of this in place, and obviously we are actively working on the banking rails right now, aren't we? And we're getting some real positive movement there. From a member perspective, the practicalities of my recoupment's come through, it's gone into the master account, it's gone in from there into my sub account. So I've got my virtual IBAN number assigned to my sub account for my 98 grantor trust. That's the trust that's filed for it in the first place. It then gets moved from that 98 grantor trust to the member's asset fortress. So another 98 grantor trust. What happens at that point? What happens for the member then?
Well, again, you see, under the agency and the attorney in fact mandate, ecclesia trustees, having been appointed as the agent for both actually. It's the agent for the living man, woman, and it's the agent for the birth certificate construct, can move funds from the tax filing grant or trust, which is, the one that MLITR Research is appointed to as its attorney in fact trustee. It can move it to the other one, which is the Asset Fortress Protocol, which is your private treasury, and that one is got the member as the member as the agent for the birth certificate construct. The birth certificate construct, the person is the trustee and the grantor of that Asset Fortress, and that Asset Fortress will have its own bank account. And MLITR Research Trading as a Ecclesia trustee can move the funds from one trust to another on the basis that it's not an income. There's no gain made.
No.
It really is a zero-sum game. There's an irony in that saying, zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Because all of the signature credit goes on the board at zero.
Zero, yeah. So once it's in that 98 grantor trust, as in the Asset Fortress, into that trust, into the bank account assigned to that trust, I'm assuming that bank account is a bank account that a member can just use like any other bank account?
It's like any other bank account. It should be possible to use it in most parts of the world because it will have a MasterCard or a Visa like debit card.
Yeah.
And you should be able to use it just about anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. And that one is sitting on the monopoly board as well, which means that people, when they use it, they can recoup it the following year. And that is the start of the infinite loop yet again.
Yep. So what you've got now is you've got another player piece on the monopoly board that is not going to have to report to, it doesn't have a reporting obligation. If you're outside the US, there's no report. If the grantor and trustee is outside the US, and i.e. the residency of that entity, that birth certificate construct is outside the US, there's no reporting requirement. If for US residents, or the birth certificate construct is a US resident, there's another structure, which is a ministry structure, a 508c1a, that we use for that. They're both doing the same thing. It's just that we don't want to have to report. The 98 series grantor trusts for foreign aliens, that's foreign aliens to the United States, doesn't have to report. The 508c1a ministry for US residents doesn't have to report.
Okay.
Both be used as private treasuries.
Gotcha.
We're going to do an interview.
We're going to do an interview on that, aren't we? So different entities, same result is what we're saying for the member anyway. Ian, it's been a fascinating one today. I hope you guys have found it eye-opening in terms of the amount of work required to do this correctly. Okay. This isn't just about filling in some forms and posting it off or emailing them to the IRS with your bank statements clipped to it. It really isn't. This is a very, very detailed, very in-depth process. It requires structure. It requires compliance. It requires real architecture for the whole thing to come together. And that is what Ian is good at. And I hope you can see that. So the last thing I want to end this on, Ian, now that we all understand how it works, is I want to talk about why recoupment is even important. You know, I get it. I feel members have been caught up in just recoupment, and I get that. They want results, they want relief, as we all do. But why does recoupment really matter to us here at the Republic of Old Souls? Let's talk about that.
Well, when I decided that I wanted to build a freedom nation, then one of the first things you've got to square away is how are you going to finance it?
Yeah.
So it's all very well saying, yeah, well, we're going to build a nation, but how is a nation going to be able to operate without without resources to do so. Do you know of any nations that operate without resources? I don't. So, you can have a club that all come together and chat with each other, but you can't really do very much. So if you want your energy infrastructure to be able to be made available to everybody in your nation, if you want the clean water from the atmosphere, or whatever solution we're going to offer, there might be more than one for clean water. If you want the communication system, if you want the food, if you want the health, if you want the currency to be able to trade with each other, if you want a marketplace, all those parts that I'm desperate to start working on, are going to need a budget to do so. If you want to create the infrastructure of a bona fide nation with its own sovereign status as a nation, you can't do that without a budget. So my early plan, which hasn't deviated, to be fair, it's the same plan I had from the beginning, is, well, how are we going to finance it? We can't go to venture capital firms and say, hey, we're going to be setting up a nation. Do you fancy investing in it? Because they're not going to do it. You could do a crowd fund, but a lot of people are going to go, sounds a bit pie in the sky to me. I'm not going to put my money into that. So the best way to finance it was signature credit. Well, I can't recoup enough signature credit to finance a nation on my own. So therefore you need your membership. And if you can finance it from taking a donation from each of your members who are recouping their signature credit, which they never would have done before because they wouldn't have known about it, or even if they knew about it, it's highly unlikely they would have figured out how to do it. And then if you can make it such that you can take a donation and then that donation can be recouped as signature credit, then it's not, you're not deducting anything from the member's signature credit in the, as you go through year by year, you're not actually deducting anything. It's just it's just another accounting exercise and a cash flow exercise. So it means that you can finance the entire nation with signature credit, which, by the way, is what the Kabbalah's doing. Doing the same as them, but in a different way. And you then convert your signature credit that you're getting as donations into the nation into substance. So now you can build your nation with substance, with land that's got no other titles on it. You've got the land, you've got the gold, you've got the precious metals, you've got the minerals, you've got everything that you need, substance, to run your nation, and bring in all the suppliers of all the different solutions in the freedom, within the freedom plan itself, the energy and the water and the food and the health and all that. You can bring all of those in, but more than bring them in, you can finance them. So for example, somebody who's designed some energy solution, it's genius, they can't get financing. Where are they going to get financing from? No one's going to finance free energy, are they?
No.
But the ROS nation will. The Old Souls Nation Foundation will, because it's perfectly aligned to what it wants for its membership. So that's it's about funding those that have already got the technology. And if you look around, there's every bit of technology that we need as a independent nation is already out there, but they're struggling. Those guys are struggling to bring that to the market. A, they haven't got a market, an easy market to promote it to, and B, they haven't got the budget to roll it out. We've got the market because that's the membership, and we've got the budget because we'll have the share of the signature credit recoupment. So that's it's just financial engineering. How do you solve that problem? And that's what I've wanted to do from the beginning.
And I want the members to get excited about this. I really do, because this is where it's at, guys. It's not recoupment. I know recoupment is going to bring some immediate relief to many of you, and I get that. I really do. We all want it to come in, and it will. But the bigger picture here is the freedom plan. So I want you to start thinking ahead about that as well, because recoupment isn't going to be available forever. So you've got to start thinking smart with this. You've got to start thinking about, how can I protect my family? How can I future proof using this vehicle of currency creation, of the signature credit recoupment, to be able to do that, and then start utilizing all of these different aspects of the freedom plan. So let's just take one category. The one we were talking about. Let's talk about energy, for example. If you're sitting there thinking that free energy doesn't exist and no one's invented it, you've been under a rock. It's been around for decades. It's just been suppressed like anything else. So I'm going to give you guys a little challenge here. Go onto the internet and type in the letter E, the letter N, the letter G, and the number 8. ENG8. And look up that website. The guy that runs it is a lovely guy. I've done an interview with him, called Haslan Back. You can go on to the ROS Media channel, which is probably where you're watching this, or have been watching this if you're watching the recording, and look up my interview with Haslan Back from ENG8. They have that technology already. It works. It's safe. They've just ran out of funding. They're struggling with funding in terms of getting it from working models to then commercial manufacture. But they have the ability to power a house and heat a house with one single unit. And some of these units are no bigger than this glass here. You can literally power an entire house. And the fuel for that is water. It splits hydrogen molecules. It creates a lot of heat. So the terrible byproduct of this is that you get to heat your house for free. How awful is that? And the other byproduct of it is that it creates between 7 to 10 times more electricity than it needs to run. Yeah. These are the types of technologies that we want to put the money into, to call it what you want to call it, money, call it credit. We want to put these people in a position where they can finish this amazing work that they've started, and that everybody within the nation can benefit from that as well. That is why we're doing signature credit recoupment. It's for no other reason but the freedom plan. So, call to action, Ian, in terms of people's next steps. I know if you're new to this, I apologize if we've hit you with possibly one of the most technical discussions we've ever had. But, you know, this was an important one to do, I think, for members as well, who've been with us for a while. And I hope you can all see what is actually having to take place to make recoupment happen. Like I said, it's not just filling in a few forms and posting them off or emailing the IRS. It's really, really very complicated. And takes a lot of work and a lot of resource to do that. And it's taken Ian a lot of his bandwidth to put this all together as well. So I appreciate what you've done, Ian. I hope the members do too. But in terms of call to action, if people are new to this, what would be their next steps from here?
Well, I know that there is a limit to how much you know, our membership can recoup each year, which is limited to the taxes paid by the payers, which is the investment bank. There is, you can't take any more out of the system year by year than the taxes that the investment banks have paid. And I also know that once it's common knowledge that go to ROS and you can get signature credit recoupment, we'll have a waiting list pretty long to join up. And you know, at some point in the future, we're going to say we're at capacity, so the restaurant's full. You know, you don't even come back tomorrow because we've only got our customers in here and they're going to stay in here. So we're not even open for you tomorrow. We're just not open anymore. We've closed our door and everybody's inside. I'm sure that there'll be some people who'll die, and there'll be other slots coming open, and we may have to modify the amount that each of the the members' envoys recouping each year, because some people are recouping way too much, in my opinion, without justification or legitimate justification, just because it's a bit greedy. But the bottom line is that, you know, when a lot of people think, well, okay, I'll wait for 6 months or a year and I'll see what what the landscape looks like then. I think that's the wrong decision. I really do. I think you should get going with it if you can. And because, you know, tomorrow I'm doing a webinar on how new members can actually enroll with no cost at all, with no upfront donation at all. So there's not really any excuse. If you like what you hear and you know enough people, and you know what you've done, Andy, is you know, what I want everyone to do who's got social media is, you know, put a little advert out, and you know, you'd be surprised how many people are interested in the subject. It's quite extraordinary how many people this solution will solve so many people's problems.
It has mass appeal. Why would it not have mass appeal at the end of the day? Who wouldn't want to recoup all of their signature credit going back to the age of 18? Why would you not want to do that?
I think some people are afraid of it because they don't understand what it is, and they think they might get themselves in trouble by doing it. Because what happens is, I think people look at it, 1099 OID, let's go and look on ChatGPT about that, and it's going to tell them, if you do it, you could end up with a frivolous filing penalty, or you could go to jail if you do it on a big scale. And I think that puts a lot of people off because they just don't know what it is. And I think that is that, and the propaganda about me puts a lot of people off. I say, you know, if you're still watching this, I say, you know, really try to get your head around, why is there propaganda, and why we have 600 million of confirmed recoupment IRS wages and tax transcripts if it wasn't real. So look through the propaganda, and then ask the question, why is there propaganda about me when all I've ever tried to do is to solve complex problems? And I've blown the whistle. So I'm the whistleblower who became the truth teller, who's a little bit more tenacious and a little bit more capable to put these types of things together. So I become a bit dangerous to the cabal's control agenda, I think.
Yeah, agreed. So if you are watching this on today's date, which is Friday, the 24th of April, it is 1:30 roughly in the afternoon UK time that we are actually shooting this live. So if you're watching right now and you're new and you do want to find out more about how you can recoup signature credit back to the age of 18, then what I would recommend you do is go here. If you go to the website roswebinars.is, you click on that, roswebinars.is, there will be a registration link on there where you can join us tomorrow morning. Ian and I are going to be back in the morning at 10 a.m. back here on our platform, breaking this down in a less technical manner, shall we say, than we have done today. But I think the fact that we've done the technical side today, even if somebody is new, this should give you some real substance behind the fact that Ian knows what he's doing. The architecture is real, it's robust, and it works. 1.5 billion in terms of recoupments, 600 million already confirmed by the IRS on the wages and tax transcripts. This is why we're doing what we're doing, guys. Everything is geared towards the freedom plan, but ultimately, nobody needs to lose here. Everybody can win. You get to create financial relief and freedom for you and your family. You get to protect them moving forwards. You get to move into a community that is only interested in freedom and nothing else. And that's what we're trying to build here. So I would say register for the webinar, please, if you can. If you were a member, spread the word. Just to give you an understanding of what Ian was talking about there in terms of putting just little ads out. My wife and I ran a couple of 60-second videos on TikTok. Granted, we've been doing it for a while, so our followings are getting bigger. But you'll be amazed at how many people will engage with this type of content. People are struggling right now. They really are. Cost of living's going through the roof. We've spoken about that on webinars that Ian's done, and people are looking for solutions and looking for relief. And we have something here that provides relief and solution for pretty much all or most of the problems that they're facing. So if you want to start getting involved in the social media side of things, Ian and I were also going to be doing an interview on that as well in the coming weeks, where we'll break down and I'll give you, you know, our experience of what we've been leveraging on TikTok and on social media to be able to do that. So if you're an advocate or you're an advocate here at the Republic of Old Souls and you want to learn a little bit more about how you can leverage social media, 60 seconds a day, quick video, an immense amount of coverage. We've had videos that have reached 4 million views on some of our videos, and typically anywhere from 50 to 250,000 views with thousands of comments that we just cannot keep up with. So if we can do it, you can do it. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Ian, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Only that I was a bit flattered when somebody said recently, you know, what you've put together here, Ian, it's a candidate for the Nobel Prize, and yeah. I was quite chuffed with that. So
no, I think that's amazing. But like we said, it solves the vast majority of people's problems right now, doesn't it? So it has mass appeal. We just need to get the word out to people that are struggling, to people who need relief, and to people who don't resonate with the control agenda and are looking for freedom. If that's you, join us tomorrow. And if you can't make it tomorrow, I hope to see you back on another episode with Ian and myself here in the near future. Have a great day. Bye for now.